Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Cody.
Hi, Cody.
Lauren asked me to fill in this week, and I thought it kind of works out quite well. Actually, in my theology unit this week, we've been looking at communion, the doctrine of communion, I suppose, and its biblical background, as well as the, I suppose, historical development and its historical background, looking at the debates between 9th century French monks and all those kind of important theological works. So my communion thought today comes from an Instagram reel that I saw. It said something along the lines, I can't even really remember, I just scrolled past and just was like text, and it just said something like, if you read Jesus' feeding miracles and don't conclude that Jesus doesn't want people to go hungry, you're missing the point. And it just stuck with me because it's really simple, but I have, I suppose, primarily thought about Jesus' miracles in terms of they show Jesus to be God, and that's the most important thing. And that's true, I suppose, but just this idea that Jesus really cares about the hungry. And in the feeding miracle, I think it's really interesting, the same words are used to describe Jesus' breaking of the bread and sharing it with the people as, in Luke's gospel in particular, as the way the Lord's Supper is described later on in Luke, the blessing of the bread, breaking it and giving it out. I think, considering those two stories together, we see this beautiful picture, this foretaste of the new creation where no one will go hungry and no one will be thirsty. As there was enough bread for everyone in Jesus' feeding miracles, at the communion table there is enough for everyone and all are welcome. But for me, it also reminds me that the table cannot be divorced from the real needs of people. We're looking at 1 Corinthians 11, and Paul, this is somewhat of a difficult passage. Paul talks about drinking judgment upon yourselves at communion, but Paul's confronting this inequity, and people are coming to that communion meal, and some were going hungry, whilst others were getting drunk, and Paul's kind of reminds them that this is Christ's body and we cannot come to the table divided. We cannot separate it from the real needs of the world around us. So as we take the elements at the end of the service and we conclude with the go of Christ, may we remember how interlinked those two things are. That as we come to the table, we are committing to a fair distribution of goods for all people. And in taking the elements, we hope and we work towards a world where none will go hungry. And we share our lives as Christ shared his life with us.
So this happened once before, and I swore it would never happen again. I said to Lauren, that should never happen again, like the playing and the thing. And then about 4 weeks ago, Lauren said, any chance you could swap with me? And of course, I just said, yeah, sure, helpful. Did not look at the roster at all. So I only have myself to blame. But I'm actually also really grateful because if you've been tracking with this sermon series, you'll know that this section of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, as Kathleen said to me before the service, is the jewel in the crown, the centerpiece. And it's beautiful. So I'm going to invite you to turn to Matthew chapter 6. I'm going to read from verses 1 to 18. If you don't have a Bible, just bring up Facebook or look at a reel, because it helped Cody big time. That was so good, Cody. It was great. I love hearing you speak. It's great. And it links really beautifully with what we're looking at today. So Matthew chapter 6, I'm reading from the New Living, NIV. Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honoured by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they'll be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This, then, is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive others when they've sinned against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive you. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, I was given a title for this sermon, and it was the title, Audience of One. And I was sitting with that as a phrase that I was familiar with, particularly I first came across it going to Churchland's Christian Fellowship, and it was Ray Helen Fissenden, who was the music director at the time and like a second mum to me in some of my most difficult years, reminding us that it's not a show to sing to the audience of one. So I really get that title. I think it's a needed corrective, and the whole idea of stop performing to the crowd, stop chasing the likes, stop shaping your spiritual life around what other people think you should be doing or what other people say you should look like. Direct everything toward God, who is the audience of one, and I think that's helpful. But I also felt myself wanting to push back on this idea of audience of one, because what I found myself thinking was even the idea of an audience of one has the idea of an audience. It still runs the risk of us taking it in the direction of a performance. Even one is a crowd of one. And what if Jesus has put this section right here in the middle of the most important sermon ever preached? Well, certainly Matthew's shaping of this teaching is trying to move us somewhere that isn't actually about performance. What if he's trying to move us from performing for God to just simply being in God, being with God? Could that be enough? I find that more challenging, because I don't mind a stage. And I suppose that's the question I'm sitting with today, with this passage. Now, before we dive into this text, I just want to remind you about something in terms of where this sits. It's been kind of hinted at, but in week 1, if you haven't heard this message and joined the Westcity community kind of Facebook page, because there's a drawing that Kathleen put in front of us of the structure of the Sermon of the Mount. And, you know, having studied theology myself, I was like, man, we never heard, this is amazing. It was like, as Kathleen unpacked it for the teaching team, it was just such a gift. So listen to week 1 of this series. Because what it points out is that the structure of the Sermon of the Mount is what's known as chiasm. It's chiastically structured, which is a literary device that the structure mirrors itself. So it's not so much having a beginning, middle, and end, but sort of an outside moving inside, and in the middle is the jewel, is the gem. Kathleen drew it like a mountain, and the centerpiece being this passage. I thought of it a little bit like, the babushka dolls, the Russian, and you pull one apart, and there's another one there, you pull it apart, and then and there's the little tiny one, easy to be missed, but it's the center of this little babushka doll, and this is Jesus' babushka doll. So the center of this sermon is actually the Lord's Prayer. And the center line of the Lord's Prayer is on earth as in heaven. On earth as in heaven. So I feel really grateful. I feel like in the famous words of Ted Lasso, I fell out of the lucky tree, hit every branch on the way down, and fell into a patch of sour gummies. Because I didn't know I'd be speaking on this. And I'm really grateful that I get to. Because everything that we're looking at in this series is orbiting around this idea. Everything is pointing towards it. The whole vision of Jesus for human life is captured in that single phrase, on earth as it is in heaven. The reality of heaven becoming actual in the texture, in the fiber, in the fabric of human life and human existence. So let's hold that as we look at this passage. We're not going to read it all through, but just go back to verse 1. Watch out, Jesus says. Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. When I was thinking about this, the thought came to mind, how do you know if someone's a long-distance runner? They tell you. Now, I love long-distance running, right? So don't get me wrong. I'm not in the shape I was, and I'm not engaged in running as much as I was, but look, I've got to tell you, it's true. Hey, what'd you get up with on the weekend? Oh, just a cheeky 10. What's a cheeky 10? I'm a runner. It's like anyway, so, but then I got thinking, how do you know if someone's a vegan? Now, yeah, they tell you. I was a vegan runner. So how terrible for my household and all my friends. No offense to anyone that's vegan here. Like I'm genuinely having a crack at myself there. But look, it is true. Like it is. There's some truth to this. So, and Jesus gives some examples here in Matthew 6:1. He gives 3 examples. He talks about giving, he talks about praying, and he talks about fasting. And each one follows this exact same pattern. And each one he uses a key word, and he says, "Do not be like the." Did you hear it? Hypocrites. Yeah. Now, we can hold that word with some harshness, because we can think, do not be like the liars, the deceivers. But actually, in Greek, the word was hypokrites, and it meant stage actor. And the hypokrites held up, the happy, sad masks? That's the hypokrites. It's the stage actor. Someone performing a role, someone whose outside and inside don't match. And in each case, Jesus says about the same thing about them. They've received their reward in full. And even that phrase, the phrase in the original Greek is apeko. And my understanding of that word is it's basically like if there were stamps and receipts back in the day, like you get at Bunnings. Like, I've got the receipt, but for some reason, As I'm walking out the door, you want to stamp it as well. Yeah, anyway. It's just a personal hang up with Bunnings that I've got, but it just seems an inefficient process. But anyway, but that's essentially what a PECO is. It's the receipt being stamped saying paid in full, nothing outstanding. And that's what Jesus is saying you get. You get the applause from the crowd, and that's it, paid in full. That's the stamp right there. And then Jesus 3 times offers 3 alternatives, and he says, instead of that, instead of being so performative, go into your room, go to a place of solitude, shut the door, and give in a way that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing. And fast without the performance of suffering, of grimace, and all the kind of pain of missing out on food. Because God, Jesus says, who is in secret will repay you. Not God who watches from the stalls, grading your performance. God who's already there, already in that secret place. And I guess that's where I want to push back on this idea of audience of one. Because the framework still assumes that there's a stage of some kind, that there's still a performance, there's still a you doing some things and a God out there somewhere watching, evaluating, keeping score. And it's still a performance, just with a slightly better audience, or a lot better audience. But look at what Jesus actually says. He doesn't say, pray better, give more sincerely, fast with purer motives. He says, go into your room, shut the door, get off the stage entirely. And the reason? Because God's already there. Your Father is already there. And He's not watching from the wings. He's already in the room. He's already in secret, already present before you said a word, before you have given a cent, before you've even skipped a meal. So I'm not sure this is about performing for an audience of one. I think this is about being with someone. Someone who already knows you. Someone who already loves you. Someone who's already present in the very place where no one else can see. There's one commentator that I was looking at, RT France. He puts it like this: God is described as being in secret. Not just seeing in the secret place, but being. God being in secret, being in it. Unseen, but present, unhurried, full of love. That's not an audience, that's a relationship. Which is exactly why the Lord's Prayer lands, I think, where it does, right at the center of this passage, right at the heart of this sermon. Look at how it begins. Our Father in heaven, not, oh great audience, you who sit in the highest place, seated, observing our performances below. Father. Sorry, it's been a late night. I got back from Kununurra and last night, watched some footy, absolutely spent. It's been an amazing week. In fact, as I think about it, now this could waffle like Grandpa Simpson, but I'll give it a go. I was up in Halls Creek and Kununurra running a series of workshops on de-escalation with frontline staff in different organisations up there. One of the questions that we asked, Vicky says hi. One of the questions we were asking, it's drawn from an Indigenous word that is kind of known in the Kimberley, but it actually, I found out it's really travelled from broom. It's a broom word, not a Mirrawong word, which is the Kununurra area. And the word is lian. Lian is spirit. Lian is the inner part of us that we're actually in relationship with. It tells us if we're feeling connected to self, connected to country, connected to others, or if, and Leon sits heavy in us, is what we were talking about. Leon sits heavy in us if we're feeling disconnected. It tells us that things aren't right. And I was listening to a number of Indigenous crew up there talking about that when my Leon isn't right, I go out on country. And one person I was driving here this morning just remembering one person, Wayne, used the phrase, I go to my secret place. And in my secret place, I'm restored. And another person said, I go out on country and I'm with God. And I go fishing. And I talk about the stuff that's sitting on me and with me. And I come back and I feel light again. And such a white fella response from Fitchy, me. I said, and as I heard these words come out of my mouth, I thought, you're a moron. I said to him, oh, do you schedule that in? He just looked at me and he's like, you guttiers, which is white fella up there. You guttiers. And he just laughed at me. He wasn't laughing with me. Because at that point, I wasn't laughing. I just said to him, that was such a white fella thing to say. He's like, yeah, it was. And I said, actually, you know what? Even as I say it out loud, I realise I'm driven by calendars and schedules. And yeah, look, there's a sense that ritual's important. But I'm driven often by so many external things that are driving me, I think, in a really performative way. And what I heard when the local crew up there spoke about Leon, or their version of it, it was about a deep listening, a deep attentiveness to what's going on and what our heart is longing for. And where it gets restored is in the secret place. From this text, in the secret place, isn't God on high, but Father, Jesus says. And the Aramaic word Jesus uses is Abba, which isn't a formal title. It's what a child would say. It's what an adult son or daughter might say when they come home. It's intimate. It assumes belonging. It assumes that you're already known. I'm home. And then immediately, before a single request is made, the prayer does something striking, I think. It turns outward and upward. It asks for things that have nothing to do with us. Our Father in heaven, may your name be honoured. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. 3 desires, 3 longings, not 3 demands, not 3 performance metrics or KPIs. 3 expressions of longing. That the world would become what it was always meant to be. That the beauty and wholeness and justice of God would trickle down, soak into the actual dirt of actual life and into the actual living of the dirt people, you and me, into the very pores of our skin, on earth as it is in heaven. A line that does so much work in this text. And it's saying, the problem isn't that, we're here and God's out there somewhere. The problem is that the world as it doesn't yet match the world as it's meant to be. The world doesn't yet match the world as it's meant to be. And prayer is the practice of holding these two realities in tension. Being honest about the gap in me, the gap between how things are as God orders them to be and what's actually happening, and closing that gap. Which means this isn't an invitation to performance. It's an invitation to participation in something. And at West City, we know what that is. We know it, we see it, say it in our benediction. We acknowledge today that we've come together to be reminded of the go of Christ. That's on earth as it is in heaven. That's the life of the prayer leaking into the life of our week. And so the question is, what do we do with fasting and giving and praying? Well, how do we make sense of what Jesus is talking about here? I think he's just pointing us to practices that form us, not perform us. When you give quietly, no credit, no record, just quietly, something happens in us. That transaction between us and the person in need becomes about them, not us. Not about our reputation. We become slowly someone who gives because it's simply what love does when love takes hold. It's simply what it means to be truly human with each other as we were designed to be, because that's what heaven looks like on earth. And when you pray in secret, in retreat, in the solitude of your room with the door shut and no audience, you stop editing yourself. You stop saying the things that sound good and you start saying the things that are true. The sacred things and the scared things. The grateful things and the outrageous things. The things you'd be too embarrassed to perform. And in that unedited space, the unscripted space, something starts to happen between us and a God who already knows what we need before we ask. Which sparks a question, if that's true, why ask? Oh, well, I don't think it's to inform God, and I don't think it's to impress God. I think simply articulating our need is just an act of trust. And that's what relationship requires. Fasting, that's probably the one that feels most foreign to many of us. And I think it's the practice of discovering that the hunger you feel in your body is a truthful map of the hunger that you carry everywhere. It's a reminder that dependence isn't weakness. It's a reminder that in fasting, there's something in me that can't be filled by the next meal or the next achievement or the next affirmation. And none of these are performances of stage actors, of the hypocrites with their mask up. They're about formation. They're the slow and private and quiet work of becoming someone whose outside matches their inside. Because both are oriented toward God and not a crowd. Let me land the plane. There is the question of reward. It might feel a bit out of place, like Jesus says each time. Your Father in heaven will reward you. It's weird because Jesus isn't embarrassed by it. I get a little bit awkward about it. Because I think, shouldn't we just be doing it for nothing? Like, feels like a bit of spiritual self-interest. I do this and then I get my reward. But I don't think that reward here is transactional. I think it's a deepening. What if the reward is something deepening in us? The reward of praying in secret is deepening our knowing of God and God of us. The reward, and even us of ourselves. The reward of giving quietly is simply the becoming more generous. The reward of fasting, honestly, is discovering what or who you're actually hungry for. The reward is becoming slowly the kind of person the world needs us to be. More like Jesus. That's our vision of this church. Not a performance target, it's the direction we travel. It's a pilgrimage we're on. So, the Sermon on the Mount, it's been called the Constitution of the Kingdom. And right at the centre is the Lord's Prayer. And right at the centre of that prayer is that line, on earth as in heaven. That's the whole deal. It's not perform well enough that God stays pleased with you. If they're the chains you've been carrying, I pray that you'll let them fall to the ground. It's not being seen by the right audience. It's about the invitation to become someone in whom heaven and earth are no longer so far apart. Someone whose private life aligns with their public life. Someone who gives because generosity is just who they are, and prays because the conversation's just ongoing and God's already in the room. Someone who fasts because we've learned to sit with hunger without being consumed by it. This is what Jesus is growing. Not a community of performers, but a community of presence. The presence of moving and being and living in a way that reveals the heart and character of Jesus. And the good news is you go into that secret place. Your Father is already there, already waiting in that place of solitude, in the unseen places of your life, unhurried, unimpressed, just holding undiluted love for you. You don't have to get on stage. You never had to. You are invited to just be, to just receive. And that's what we're going to do now. And I ask those that are serving communion to come and prepare that. And as I do, can I invite you to just close your eyes, and I want to pray a prayer, a blessing over you. May you stop auditioning. May you stop rehearsing the version of yourself that you think God wants to see. May you have the faith and trust in the love of God that allows you to just show up as you are. Because the room isn't empty. The Father is already there. He's always been there. In the secret, in the mess, in the quiet you may have been avoiding. May you find that solitude this week. And then may what happens in that space slowly, steadily make its way out into how you spend your money, how you treat the person in front of you, how you move through this world. Not performance, but presence on earth as it is in heaven.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at Westcity, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.